Ambassador Velrix stepped off the transport ship and onto Earth for the first time. His three eyes blinked in sequence as they adjusted to the harsh yellow light of the human sun. Everything about this planet felt wrong. The gravity was too strong. The air was too thick with oxygen. Even the radiation levels made his scales itch beneath his ceremonial robes. The Zenari had been watching humans for 30 cycles before making contact. They had to be careful. First contact protocols existed for good reasons. Too many civilizations had destroyed themselves or others through hasty introductions. But the humans had developed faster than any species in recorded history. They went from primitive aircraft to faster-than-light travel in less than 200 years. The Council had no choice but to make contact before humans stumbled into someone less friendly. Ambassador Velrix. Welcome to Earth. A human female approached with her hand extended. Dr. Sarah Chun, the liaison officer. Velrix had studied human customs. He knew this gesture, called a handshake, was their greeting ritual. He extended his smaller three-fingered hand and felt her grip it firmly. Too firmly. He tried not to wince. "Thank you for receiving us, Dr. Chun," Velrix said through his translator device. "Your world is quite beautiful." It was a diplomatic lie. Earth was a nightmare. During their observation, the Zentari had cataloged the dangers. Earthquakes that could level cities. Storms that threw lightning and spawned whirling towers of wind. Oceans that could swallow entire vessels. And the life forms, the planet was filled with creatures that existed only to kill and eat each other. Humans had evolved in hell and somehow thrived. The welcoming ceremony took place in a large, open structure humans called a stadium. Thousands of humans had gathered to see the aliens. Velrix and his delegation of 5 other species stood on a raised platform while human leaders gave speeches. The crowd made noise constantly, a rumbling sound that made Velrix's secondary hearts race. So many of them. And they were all so large. Even their younglings were half his size. "The children's choir will now perform," announced a human official. A group of small humans filed onto the stage, maybe 40 of them. They wore matching garments and stood in neat rows on platforms that rose in tiers. Velrix relaxed slightly. The young ones were always less threatening. In every species he knew, children were fragile, protected, kept away from danger. The human younglings began making coordinated sounds. Singing, the humans called it. It was actually quite pleasant. Velrix let his 3 eyes half close, a sign of contentment among his people. Perhaps humans were not so different after all. Perhaps the reports had been exaggerated. Perhaps a scream cut through the music. One of the children on the highest tier had leaned too far backward. Velrix watched in horror as the small human toppled off the platform. The fall was at least 3 body lengths. The child would die. The ceremony would begin with death. This was a disaster, but then something happened that Velrix would replay in his mind for the rest of his life. A human male in a dark uniform stood near the platform's edge. Security personnel from his attire. The man's head snapped toward the falling child. He didn't pause. He didn't calculate. He didn't call for help. He simply moved. The security officer vaulted over the railing of the lower platform. He dropped through the air, falling with the child. His arms reached out and caught the small human against his chest. Then they hit the ground together, the man twisting his body to take the impact. Velrix heard something crack. The sound of breaking bone traveled clearly through the sudden silence. Velrix's translator picked up the human's words as he lay there. The child clutched safely against him. "I've got you. You're okay. It's just a scratch. Just a scratch." The man's arm was bent at an angle that made Velrix's stomach churn. But the human was smiling. Actually smiling as medical personnel rushed over. "Marcus, don't move. one of the medics ordered. "Kid first," Marcus said. "Check the kid." The child was crying but uninjured. Marcus had absorbed the entire impact. The medics carefully took the child and then helped Marcus sit up. His face had gone pale, and sweat beaded on his forehead, but he kept talking to the child. "See? Nothing to worry about. You're going to have a great story to tell your friends." Dr. Chun appeared beside Velrix. "I apologize for the disruption, Ambassador, but everyone is safe. Marcus will make a full recovery in a few weeks." Velrix turned all three eyes on her. "That fall should have killed them both. Your security officer is seriously injured." "How is this safe?" "Marcus broke his arm and probably has some bruised ribs," Dr. Chun said calmly. "Our bones are quite dense, and our bodies produce adrenaline in dangerous situations, which increases strength and pain tolerance. He'll be fine." "He jumped 3 stories," Velrix said. His voice was shaking. "Without equipment, without hesitation. He could have died." Dr. Chun looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. A child was in danger. Of course he jumped. That's just human nature. Over the next few days, Velrix compiled a report for the Galactic Council. He started listing human abnormalities, but quickly realized he was writing a horror document. Humans could survive falls that would shatter a Zentari's entire skeleton. They healed from injuries that would be permanently crippling to most species. Their pain tolerance was so high that they often continued functioning with wounds that should have incapacitated them. But the physical capabilities weren't what disturbed him most. It was the instinct Marcus had shown. The complete absence of self-preservation when another being, especially a young one, was in danger. Velrix had seen the security footage. From the moment the child fell to the moment Marcus jumped, only 0.7 seconds had passed. There had been no time for thought, no calculation of risk. Just action. Dr. Chun had given him access to human history files. Velrix stayed up through 3 night cycles reading. The reports from their observation teams hadn't been exaggerated. If anything, they had understated the truth. Humans threw themselves into burning structures to save others. They jumped into freezing water despite knowing they might drown. They had stories, legends, whole categories of entertainment celebrating individuals who sacrificed themselves for others. They gave medals and honors to those who showed bravery, which seemed to mean doing suicidally dangerous things for good reasons. One phrase kept appearing in the files. "Greater love hath no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends." Humans have been saying this for thousands of years. They taught it to their children. They believed it. Velrix sat in his temporary quarters, looking out at the human city below. Lights blazed everywhere. Millions of humans going about their lives, completely unaware that they were the most terrifying species the galaxy had ever encountered. Not because they were violent or cruel, but because they simply didn't value their own survival, the way every other intelligent species did. He thought about Marcus, who was probably sleeping in a medical facility somewhere, his broken arm already beginning to heal. In a few weeks, he would be back at work, ready to throw himself off another platform if needed. Because that was just human nature. Velrix began writing an addendum to his report. The Council needed to understand what they were dealing with. Humanity wasn't just another spacefaring species. They were something entirely new. Something that had evolved to face down death itself and laugh at it. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for them. 3 months had passed since first contact. Velrix now worked on Kepler Station, a mining facility built jointly by humans and the Galactic Council. The station orbited a resource-rich moon, and over 200 beings from 6 different species lived and worked there together. Velrix had volunteered for the assignment. He needed to understand humans better, and the best way was to live among them. The humans were adapting well to life alongside other species. Too well, perhaps. They treated danger with a casualness that made Velrix's scales itch. He had watched a human engineer named Sophia Okoye repair an external sensor array during a radiation storm, simply because it needed to be fixed now. She had survived with only minor radiation burns that healed within days. The station's alarm shrieked through the corridors at 0600 hours. Velrix jerked awake in his quarters, his three eyes snapping open in sequence. The alarm meant only one thing: critical emergency. All personnel, this is Commander Vex. The station commander was a Borlian, a species known for their calm rationality. But Dex's voice shook. We have a collapse in Mining Tunnel 7. 47 beings are trapped. The tunnel is flooding with methane gas from a ruptured line. Structural integrity is failing. Repeat, we have a level 1 emergency. Velrix rushed to the command center. The main screen showed a nightmare. A section of tunnel had collapsed during the night shift, trapping workers from multiple species. The sensors painted a grim picture. Oxygen levels dropping. Methane levels rising. The gas was toxic to most species and highly explosive. The tunnel structure was unstable, with secondary collapses likely. Commander Vex stood before a holographic display, his forearms moving across controls. We have approximately 90 minutes before the methane concentration reaches lethal levels. The rescue teams cannot penetrate the collapse. The structural supports are too damaged. Any attempt to dig through will cause complete tunnel failure. So we evacuate the survivors once the gas clears? Asked Velrix. Vex's eyes closed. No, the gas will kill them long before it clears. We are preparing to send in what remains we can recover afterward. You giving up? The voice came from the doorway. Sophia Okoye stood there with 11 other humans. They wore emergency environment suits, but Velrix could see the suits were standard models. Not rated for methane exposure. Not rated for unstable structures. Not sufficient for what Dex had just described. Engineer Okoye, Dex said slowly. The mathematics are clear. A rescue attempt will fail and result in additional casualties. I cannot authorize suicide missions. Sophia glanced at the other humans. Something passed between them without words. Velrix had seen this before. Humans had an uncanny ability to communicate complex ideas with tiny facial movements and body language. Sophia turned back to Vex. Then don't authorize it, Commander. We're going anyway. That's an order, Engineer. Stand down. Respectfully, sir, no. Sophia's voice remained calm. Those are our people down there. We're going to get them. Another human spoke up. His name was James Park, a structural engineer. Commander, we know the risks. We accept them. Please don't make us waste time arguing. Velrix watched Dex's face cycle through several expressions. Anger, confusion, resignation. The Borlian finally stepped aside. I cannot stop you, but I must note this is against my direct orders. Noted, sir, Sophia said. The humans moved quickly to gather equipment. Velrix followed them to the preparation area. You understand you're going to die? Velrix said to Sophia as she checked her suit seals. Maybe. She didn't look up from her work. But probably not. Humans are pretty hard to kill. The methane. Yeah, it's toxic. We know. That's why we're bringing extra oxygen and working fast. She finally looked at him with those forward-facing predator eyes. Look, Ambassador, I know this seems crazy to you, but that's my friend Yuki down there. And your assistant Torvex. And 45 others. We're not going to just let them die because the math says we can't save them. The 12 humans entered the damaged tunnel system. Velrix watched through their helmet cameras from the command center. The feeds showed twisted metal, collapsed rock, smoke, and darkness. The humans moved through it like they were made for it. They reached the first barrier in 15 minutes. A massive support beam had fallen across the tunnel, blocking the path. The humans didn't hesitate. 4 of them positioned themselves under the beam. "On 3, Sophia said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted. Velrix heard grunts of effort through the audio feed. The beam rose. Other humans scrambled through, then wedged emergency supports in place. "Sophia, your suit is breached," came a warning from the medical monitor. "Left shoulder seam." "I know. It's fine. Keeps the gas out well enough. Keep moving." They reached another collapse. This one was worse. The ceiling had come down completely, leaving only a small gap at the top. Too small for most species. But humans were flexible in ways that disturbed Velrix. He watched them squeeze through spaces that should have been impossible. Their bones somehow compressing, their bodies contorting. 50 minutes had passed. The methane levels were rising faster than predicted. "All teams, you need to exit now," Commander Lex ordered. "The tunnel will collapse completely within 20 minutes. "We're almost there," Sophia replied. "We can hear them on the other side of this wall." They began cutting through with plasma torches. The heat made the methane even more dangerous. One spark and the entire tunnel would explode. The humans worked anyway. Their hands steady at 70 minutes. They broke through. The trapped workers were huddled in a small chamber, terrified but alive. "Okay, everyone, single file," Sophia called. "Humans will carry anyone who can't move fast enough. We're getting everyone out." The retreat was chaos. A support beam gave way. James Park threw himself under it, holding it up with his back while others ran past. Velrix heard him scream in pain. 2 other humans grabbed James and dragged him along, still trying to shield others with his body, even as he went at 85 minutes. The first group emerged. Then the second. Then more. Velrix counted. 47 survivors. All of them. But the humans were still inside at 90 minutes. The tunnel gave a deep groan. "Get out now," Lex yelled. The remaining humans ran. The tunnel collapsed behind them. Dust and debris shot from the entrance. Velrix held his breath. Then, through the smoke, figures emerged. 8 humans, carrying 3 others between them. All 12 made it out. 3 were critically injured. James Park's spine was fractured. Sophia had severe methane poisoning. Another human named Chun had burns across 40% of his body. But they were alive. And all 47 trapped workers were alive in the medical bay later. Velrix visited Sophia. She lay in a regeneration bed, her breathing assisted by machines. "You almost died," he said quietly. Sophia smiled weakly. "Yeah, but I didn't, and everyone made it out. 3 of your team will take months to recover. And you did this knowing the odds of failure. We did it knowing people needed help." She closed her eyes. "I know your species thinks we're reckless. Maybe we are. But we couldn't leave them. We just couldn't. That's not who we are." "Human nature," Velrix said softly. "Yeah, just human nature." Velrix left the medical bay and returned to his quarters. He pulled up the casualty reports. 3 humans with life-threatening injuries. 9 with serious injuries. But 0 fatalities. 47 beings saved, who should have died. He had watched humans do the impossible simply because they decided it needed to be done. They hadn't argued about the mathematics or calculated survival odds. They had seen people in danger and moved toward it instead of away. The galaxy had never encountered anything like this. And Velrix was beginning to suspect the galaxy wasn't ready for it. Velrix couldn't stop thinking about the rescue. He had watched 12 humans walk into certain death and come back alive. Not through luck or a superior technology, but through sheer stubborn refusal to accept failure. It didn't make sense. Every species he knew calculated risk versus reward. Humans seemed to calculate differently. Or perhaps not calculate at all. He decided he needed to understand them better. Dr. Chun agreed to help him. "You want to know what makes us tick?" she asked over coffee in the station's cafeteria. Coffee was a human drink, a mild stimulant they consumed in large quantities. "That's a big question, Ambassador. I've studied your biology," Velric said. "Your bones are dense. Your healing is rapid. Your pain tolerance is extreme. But that doesn't explain the rescue. That doesn't explain Marcus jumping to save a child. That doesn't explain Sophia going into a collapsing tunnel." Dr. Chun smiled. "You're right. Our bodies are tough, but that's not really what makes us different, is it? It's up here." She tapped her temple. "It's how we think." Over the next weeks, Dr. Chun became his guide into human psychology. She showed him things that made his three eyes widen in disbelief. She took him to the station's gym first. Humans had built an entire room dedicated to physical suffering. Velrix watched them lift heavy metal bars until their muscles shook. They ran on machines that went nowhere until sweat poured down their faces. One human collapsed from exhaustion, then got up and continued. "Why?" Velrix asked. "Why deliberately cause pain?" "To get stronger," Dr. Chun explained. "We have a saying, no pain, no gain. We believe suffering makes us better. We seek it out. That's insane. Maybe, but it works." She showed him human entertainment next. Humans watched something called horror movies, stories designed to scare them. They paid money to be frightened. They also participated in extreme sports, throwing themselves from aircraft with only cloth to slow their fall, or climbing sheer rock faces with minimal safety equipment. "You do these things for fun," Velric said. It wasn't a question. He had seen the footage. "For fun and to test ourselves," Dr. Chun agreed. "Humans need challenges. We need to push our limits. A life without risk feels empty to us." But the history files were what truly disturbed him. Dr. Chun gave him access to humanity's past, and Velric spent days reading. He learned about explorers who sailed into unknown oceans on wooden ships, knowing they might never return. He read about scientists who exposed themselves to diseases to develop cures. He discovered mountain climbers who died trying to reach peaks because it's there. One story particularly stuck with him. A human expedition to one of Earth's poles in the early 20th century. The leader, a man named Scott, and his team had reached their goal but died on the return journey. They were found months later, frozen. In their final hours, knowing death was certain, they had written letters to their families and maintained detailed scientific records. They had faced death with calm dignity, still doing their duty. They knew they were dying and kept working. Velric said to Dr. Chun, "Why not panic? Why not give up?" "Because giving up isn't in our nature," Dr. Chun said simply. "We have another saying, do not go gentle into that good night. It means we should rage against death. Fight it. Never surrender, even when surrender is the logical choice." Velrix learned about human warfare next. Every species had conflicts, but human warfare was different. Humans had a concept called a last stand, where soldiers would fight to the death rather than retreat. They had stories celebrating these defeats as victories of spirit. The Battle of Thermopylae, the Alamo, Rorke's Drift. Humans remembered these desperate fights for thousands of years. "You celebrate failures," Velrix observed. "We celebrate courage," Dr. Chun corrected. "We celebrate the choice to stand and fight when running was an option. Because sometimes the fight matters more than the victory." Then there was spite. This concept confused Velrix more than anything. Humans would harm themselves if it meant hurting an enemy. They had burned their own cities rather than let invaders have them. They had fought wars of attrition where both sides suffered terribly, but neither would yield. They had a phrase: "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." "It's illogical," Velric said. "You lose either way." "But the enemy doesn't win cleanly," Dr. Chun explained. "They pay a price. Sometimes making your enemy hurt is worth hurting yourself. It sends a message. We will never be easy prey." One evening, Dr. Chun took him to observe a human family. The parents had a young child, maybe 5 years old. Velric watched as the father taught the child to ride a bicycle. The child fell repeatedly. Each time, the father encouraged them to try again. "Be brave," the father said. "Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing it anyway. You teach this?" Velric asked. "You teach your children to ignore fear?" "We teach them to master it," Dr. Chun said. "Fear is a tool, not a master. Every human feels fear. But we decided long ago that we wouldn't let it control us." Velric thought about his own species. The Zenari avoided danger. They calculated risks carefully. They valued survival above all else. This was normal. This was sane. What humans did was madness, but it was effective. Madness. Dr. Chun showed him one final piece of human culture: poetry. One poem in particular, written by a human named Dylan Thomas, urging his dying father to fight death itself. "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light." "This is your philosophy," Velric said slowly. "You don't accept fate. You don't accept loss. You rage against it." "Yes," Dr. Chun said. "We're a stubborn species, Ambassador. Some might say foolishly stubborn. But that stubbornness has taken us from caves to the stars in a geological blink. We don't accept limits. We don't accept impossible. We see a wall, and we break through it or climb over it or tunnel under it. But we don't turn back." Velric sat in silence for a long moment. The rescue on Kepler Station. Sophia and her team didn't think they could succeed, did they? "Oh, they thought they might die," Dr. Chun admitted. "But they also knew they had to try. Because not trying, not fighting for those people, would have been worse than death. It would have been a betrayal of what we are. And what are you?" Dr. Chun smiled. "Humans. Stubborn, reckless, often irrational humans who refuse to go gentle. Who see someone in trouble and run toward them instead of away. Who fight impossible odds because someone has to. Who suffer and endure and keep going because that's what we do." She paused. "You keep calling us terrifying. Maybe we are. But we're also the species that will throw ourselves between others in danger. We're the species that carries our wounded and remembers our dead and never, ever gives up on each other." Velric understood then. Human nature wasn't just physical toughness or high pain tolerance. It was a fundamental difference in how they viewed existence itself. They had looked at a hostile universe and decided to punch back. They had made their own fear into a weapon. They had turned suffering into strength, and they were teaching this philosophy to other species simply by existing alongside them. Velric had seen it himself. The other beings on Kepler Station had started taking more risks, pushing themselves harder. Human nature was contagious. "The galaxy isn't ready for you," Velric said quietly. Dr. Chun's smile faded. "Maybe not. But the galaxy is going to have to adapt. Because we're not changing. This is who we are. This is what we'll always be." Velric returned to his quarters that night with his mind full of disturbing thoughts. Humanity had been in space for less than a century. They were the newest members of the galactic community. But they were already changing it simply by being themselves. He thought about Marcus and Sophia and all the others. He thought about parents teaching children to be brave. He thought about a species that looked at death and snarled back at it. The galaxy had existed for millions of years in relative stability. Species cooperated, avoided unnecessary risks, valued survival and longevity. It was logical. It was sane. Then humans arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 6 months after first contact with humanity. Velric stood in the Great Chamber with representatives from 43 species. The holographic display at the center showed a nightmare made real. The Devour Swarm had returned. Chancellor Mortis, a Quellan elder with centuries of experience, addressed the assembly. Her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. 17 civilizations have fallen to the swarm. Billions of beings consumed. We have tracked their movement for 300 years, always staying ahead of them, always evacuating before they arrived. Now they have changed course. They are heading for the core worlds. The display showed projections. Red lines spreading across star maps like blood in water. The swarm moved slowly but inevitably, consuming everything in their path. They were not a species that could be reasoned with. They were a force of nature, locusts that ate worlds. We have 60 days before they reach the outer colonies, Mortis continued. I am recommending full evacuation of all threatened systems. We retreat to the inner core and establish a defensive perimeter. How many beings in the evacuation zone? Asked a Borlean representative. Approximately 40 billion. Silence fell over the chamber. 40 billion lives abandoned. The swarm would consume them all. We should fight. The voice came from the human delegation. Captain Emma Reeves stood at the human podium. She was young by human standards, barely 40 years old. But Velrix had learned that age meant little with humans. They gave responsibility to those who earned it, not those who had lived longest. Captain Reeves, Mortis said carefully, your species has been in space for 1 generation. You do not understand what we face. The swarm cannot be fought. It can only be avoided. Everything can be fought, Emma said. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price. The price is extinction, Mortis replied. We have run simulations. The mathematics are absolute. We do not have the military strength to stop them. Fighting means dying. Then we die fighting. Emma's voice was calm. But we're not abandoning 40 billion people without trying. Muttering spread through the chamber. Velrix watched the other representatives. He saw confusion, disbelief, some anger. They thought the humans were being foolish. They didn't understand yet, but Velrix did. The human delegation wishes to commit suicide. That is their choice, said a Zentari counselor. But they cannot expect us to join them in this madness. Emma looked around the chamber. Her eyes, those forward-facing predator eyes, seemed to evaluate everyone present. Let me tell you about humans, she said. Let me tell you who we are and where we come from. She gestured, and the holographic display changed. It showed Earth rotating slowly. This is our homeworld. It doesn't look dangerous, does it? But let me show you what we grew up with. Images flashed across the display. Storms that threw lightning and spawned tornadoes. Earthquakes that split the ground. Tsunamis that swallowed coastlines. Volcanoes that darkened the sky. Our planet tried to kill us every single day, Emma said. And we survived. We didn't just survive. We thrived. More images. Predators with teeth and claws. Venomous creatures. Parasites and diseases. Everything on our world wanted to eat us or poison us or infect us. We were not the strongest. We were not the fastest. We were not the most deadly. But we refused to die. The images shifted to human history. Cave paintings. Ancient cities. Ships sailing unknown seas. We could have stayed in our safe caves. We could have avoided the dangers. But that's not what we did. We walked out into the dangerous world and we conquered it. Not because we were powerful, but because we were too stubborn to give up. Emma's voice grew stronger. You call us terrifying. You've spent 6 months cataloging our pain tolerance, our bone density, our healing factor. You've watched us do things you consider suicidal and wondered why we're not all dead. You want to know the secret? She paused, and Velrix realized every being in the chamber was listening. We're scared. All the time. Every human in this galaxy knows fear. When Marcus jumped to save that child, he was terrified. When Sophia went into that collapsing tunnel, she thought she was going to die. We're not fearless. We're something much more dangerous than fearless. We're afraid, and we do it anyway. Emma let that sink in. We made fear our tool instead of our master. We taught ourselves that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to act despite fear. We pass this down to our children. We tell stories about it. We celebrate it. We built our entire civilization on the idea that being scared doesn't mean you stop fighting. The display showed the swarm now, the red tide spreading across the map. You've run from them for 300 years. You've watched 17 civilizations die. You've done the logical thing, the safe thing, the smart thing. And they're still coming. Still consuming. Still unstoppable. But they've never faced humans before. Velrix found himself standing. His 3 eyes focused on Emma. He knew what he had to do. Captain Reeves is correct, he said. His voice surprised him with its strength. I have lived among humans for 6 months. I have watched them do impossible things. I have studied their history and their philosophy. They are terrifying, but not because they are violent or cruel. He looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. They are terrifying because they don't know how to give up, because they will fight for strangers, because they run toward danger instead of away from it, because they rage against death itself, and sometimes, impossibly, they win. I vote we stand and fight. The chamber erupted. Voices shouted in a dozen languages. Mordith called for order. When silence finally returned, she looked at Velrix with an expression he couldn't read. Ambassador Velrix, you're recommending the Galactic Council commit military forces to a battle we cannot win. I am recommending we learn from humanity, Velrix said. For 300 years, we have calculated and retreated and survived. And the swarm has grown stronger. Perhaps it is time to try something different. Perhaps it is time to stop running and start fighting. The vote was called. It was close. Many species voted to evacuate. But enough voted to stay. Enough had been inspired by 6 months of watching humans be human. The swarm arrived 60 days later at the outer colonies. They found a fleet waiting for them. Ships from 43 species led by human vessels. The battle lasted 3 weeks. It was brutal. Millions died. Ships were destroyed. Entire stations were lost, but the swarm was stopped. Humans taught the galaxy something in those 3 weeks. They taught them that predators become prey when their prey fights back. They taught them that impossible odds just meant you had to fight harder. They taught them that sometimes survival isn't about running away, but about standing your ground and making the enemy bleed for every inch. Velrix watched the final battle from a command ship. He saw a human destroyer, the Indomitable, ram itself into a swarm hive ship to save a Zentari cruiser. He saw human marines boarding swarm vessels in suits that wouldn't protect them, fighting hand-to-hand against creatures twice their size. He saw humans doing what humans did best, refusing to die quietly. When it was over, when the swarm retreated for the first time in recorded history, Emma found Velrix in the observation deck. They stood together, looking at the stars where the battle had raged. We lost a lot of good people, Emma said quietly. But we won, Velrix replied. The impossible happened. Because you taught us how. Emma shook her head. We didn't teach you anything. We just reminded you of something you'd forgotten. Every species in this galaxy survived somehow. You all had to fight and struggle and refuse to give up, or you wouldn't have made it to the stars. You just got comfortable. You forgot what it felt like to have your back against the wall. And humans never forgot? We can't forget. Our whole history is one long story of survival against odds that should have killed us. It's baked into who we are. She smiled. You called it terrifying. We just call it human nature. But maybe it's not just human nature. Maybe it's what any intelligent species becomes when they refuse to surrender. Velrix thought about that. About the Zenari troops who had held the line when retreat was an option. About the Borlean engineers who had repaired damaged ships in the middle of battle. About the Quellan pilots who had flown suicide runs to take out swarm command nodes. In 3 weeks of fighting alongside humans, the galaxy had changed. Species that had forgotten how to fight remembered. Beings that had calculated survival odds learned to ignore the mathematics. The safe, logical, stable galactic community had discovered something fierce inside themselves. Perhaps you're right, Velrix said. Perhaps this capacity was always in us. But it took humans to remind us. To show us that being terrified doesn't mean being defeated. Emma looked out at the stars. The swarm will come back. This wasn't a permanent victory. Then we'll fight again, Velrix said. And he meant it. Because that's what we do now. That's what we learn from you. We don't run. We don't calculate. We don't accept impossible. We stand and fight. Just human nature, Emma said with a smile. No, Velrix corrected her. Just nature. The nature of any species that decides to survive, no matter the cost. You humans have it in abundance. But you taught the rest of us we had it too. We just needed to remember. They stood in silence, looking at the battlefield where 43 species had learned to be terrifying together. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of calculated retreat was over. The age of standing and fighting had begun, and it had all started because humans didn't know any other way to be.